Welcome to We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T. I am Alicia J, and I'm here with Ashley Nicole Moss.
Hello, hello. My reverse jinx worked. We'll explain what that means in just a second.
We definitely will. And we are live right here with you after a riveting UConn USC game. It was everything. Well, the second half was everything that we wanted it to be. Yeah, the Elite Eight rematch from last season that we all wanted to see. So many things to talk about, and we definitely want to hear you guys talk about it too. So make sure you drop some comments in there because, you know, you're here with us live. So we want to make sure that we're talking with you. And in addition to that, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we want to stay connected so that you get the alerts for shows like this and all the shows that we do every single week. So you see all of the information below. So make sure that you connect with us there. And then in addition to that, subscribe. And if you want something that's a little bit more turnkey, right here, we have a QR code for you to scan that will take you right to everything that you need to know about We Need to Talk Now and how we can connect and how you can get the alerts sent right to you so that you know when these shows are happening. Listen, we're excited to be live. We're excited anytime we can connect with you, but we can't connect if you don't subscribe and if you don't lock in all of that information. So make sure that you do that. Ashley, man, like before we even start this, I do want to mention something because we have so much basketball to cover, but I definitely want to mention there was an amazing collab that happened in this game. It was together. They did a collab with Nike, and both teams really on the shoes that they had the Everyone Watches Women's Sports, and then they were wearing the shirts. And I just have to say, I have to give Together their props on that because it's amazing to see what a shirt can do. That's all I have to say. When we talk about all of the players in women's sports and how it's booming and how, you know, it's exploding in a lot of ways, there are so many people that are doing that, so many things that are moving the needle. And that collaboration was huge. Like you saw it everywhere. The fact that they're at one of the biggest women's college basketball games is huge. And it's just a testament to that everyone is doing something, right? Everyone has it. I'm actually wearing a collab right here with Round 21. They did a collab with Paige Bueckers and UConn as well. And so, I mean, you just, all these collabs, everything that is happening, the exciting game that we just watched, I'm just hyped up because people are doing great things in women's sports. And it's just so beautiful to see. I just had to mention that at the top.
No, definitely mention it. We saw the coaches wearing the shirts on the sidelines, and it was very, very cool. And obviously, the more just the different types of collabs grow, the more it grows the game, more it grows brand awareness for, you know, franchises, organizations, programs, but also the individual athletes. And I think that that's, you know, the time that we are in finally. It's been a long time coming. Obviously, it's not perfect and there's still room for improvement, but I think every single time a brand or an entity, invest in women's sports or a particular women's athlete, it just continues to grow the game. So I love to see it. And it was very cool to see that in such a polarizing marquee matchup like this one we saw tonight. So
yeah, and you mentioned this matchup, Ashley. I mean, I can't say that it was pretty from start to finish. We can't say that. But what
I mentioned the reverse jinx in the beginning. So we have a group chat for the We Need to Talk Now podcast, which you guys are listening to right now. And I said, you know, when it was kind of looking like it was going to be a blowout, I tweeted in the chat. I said, I'm tweeting in the chat. I texted in the chat. I said, yeah, this is going to be a relatively quick recap because it's not looking good for UConn. They were really struggling, especially when the moments Paige wasn't on the floor. But I don't know what type of, you know, rah-rah camaraderie speech was given in the locker room at halftime, but whatever it was, it worked because that flip was switched all the way up.
Yes, it was. And you know, Gino has some words because he's definitely not one to hold back. That's an understatement. So you know that there was a lot said in that. Or maybe he just stood there and looked at him and said, you know what it is. Like, let's get out there and do it.
You know, like when your parents give you that, like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed look.
Yes.
And you're just like, can you yell? Can you do something? Don't just look at me in silence." Like, yeah,
Yeah.
so
And I definitely feel like Gino has that. I mean,
mhm,
we see all of his expressions and everything. So there ain't no telling what he said, but it definitely brought them back to life because that first
right.
half was really rough. But Ashley, let me get your initial thoughts just on, obviously USC was the winner of this matchup,
Mhm.
but what are your initial thoughts on the overall game?
I think UConn really struggled in the first half playing without Paige on the floor. They were getting good looks at the basket, but the shots weren't falling. At times, because the shots weren't falling, they were playing very frantically, even when the game was still relatively close. On the other side of the ball, I think that USC did a really great job moving that basketball around and everyone was getting a touch. Obviously, you had JuJu at 7 points in the first quarter, but if you look at that score, the remaining half was kind of divvied up against the rest of the girls on the floor. I will say, though, and we'll get into things that they can improve on, and I'll hit upon this again, but just briefly. In that second half, they got very sloppy with the basketball, which ultimately allowed UConn to chip away at that deficit, ultimately bring that game close, ultimately tie that game. I think they got very sloppy on the defensive side of things, which allowed the Huskies to find the holes in the game to allow them to bring things to the point where they ultimately brought them. So, a testament to the Huskies being resilient, and then kind of a knock on the Trojans for not really securing that ball and playing with their lead when ultimately it's a lead that shouldn't have even been chipped away at in the first place. So I think, like I said, when we get later in the show, we can dive into a little bit more. But I think there were good things and there were some things that I definitely saw that both teams can improve on.
Absolutely. And shout out to Abby. She's back and she said Connecticut looked tentative at times in early stages of the game. And that is so true. We all saw last year when JuJu, she had so much emotion after their
Mhm.
loss to them at the Elite Eight. And you knew then, and I mean, I definitely knew then watching it because I got emotional watching JuJu because she was so emotional, right?
Right.
You knew then that she was going to have that on her brain. She was going to be in that gym working for when they saw each other next. And you could see that the whole USC team had that in the first half. They
Yeah.
came out, they were ready. They had a plan of action, they were executing it, not perfect, right? But they were doing everything that they needed to do to keep that lead in the first half. They did a great job at that. They were also like, there were other people contributing outside of JuJu that were opening up things and even letting JuJu be able to do more. And so, it was great. USC came out to play. They came out to win this game. Now, in the second
Yeah.
half, we can talk more about that. But definitely, that tentativeness that Abby was talking about was there from UConn, and USC came to play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that again, this it was just really, really dope to see both of these women match up. And I think that so much of the focus, and I mean, totally get this was on Paige and JuJu and the rematch, and two of the biggest stars in college basketball across the board, men and women's going at it. But this really was a testament to how well these teams are constructed from so many other young women on the floor, because you think of people like Sarah Strong and Kiki on the side of USC. I mean, there were moments where both Paige and JuJu went cold. Obviously, Paige went back to the locker room dealing with that, whatever was obviously bothering her that wasn't something that was that substantial. She actually got back in the game. But you saw the other girls on the floor pick up the slack in other areas. So as much as it was so JuJu and Paige focused, gotta give flowers to the other girls on the court. They really are the reason why this game ultimately came down to the wire. Everybody did their part in some way, shape, or form.
I would add Avery Howell to that from USC for sure. And then Ashlyn Shade, she had some key minutes for UConn in that game as well. I do think, though, if we're talking about support, right? Coming into this game, a lot of people said that USC really wasn't giving a lot of support for JuJu, and I feel
Mhm,
like they kind of heard some of that, and then
mhm.
people came, and I'm not saying that people hadn't contributed all season, that's not what I'm saying, but just more, right? And I feel like they did that in this game. However, UConn, Sarah Strong, like I just mentioned, Ashlyn Shade, like they did some Sarah Strong specifically needs to be mentioned on her own, because she, even though she missed those free throws at the end, and I know that's going to haunt her for sure. I've been there.
Yeah.
She had an amazing game, and she was one of the only reasons why UConn was in that game at all, especially going into the second half.
Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
When we talk about the standouts, right? When you talk about Sarah Strong, double from her, 22 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals. A freshman, first of all. Just, I know she's probably kicking herself right now for that last look at the free throw line.
She shouldn't, though. She shouldn't.
Yeah,
because
I know she shouldn't, but I
Yeah.
already know that's keeping her up tonight, and maybe the next day, maybe the day after that. You know, Emma said it's giving Stewie. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure those free throws kept Stewie up as well.
Not funny, but
But we talk about the supporting cast, and Paige had an incredible game herself, 22 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 for 10 in shooting in the first half, had a big shot in the second half, ultimately helped the Huskies go on that 10-0 run that helped them pull within 6 and then ultimately tie the game, and then the trajectory of how it went. But when we look at some of the other women on the floor, I mean, the numbers are there, but it's really so Paige and Sarah focused in holding down the whole fort. You know, you have Caitlin with 5, you have Ashlyn with 9, Kiki with 5 as well. I mean,
that's where I was going, Ashley, is literally they still need more contributors on that team. They can't
you can never
lean
just
into those players.
Right. 44 points from 2 people is not a great look. You know what I mean?
And if you know, they're talking about both of these teams being a contender to win it all. And that can't happen, especially on the UConn side, if you don't get more people to contribute. You know, you cannot lean on just those players, as amazing as they are. You just can't do that.
I think the same can be said on the USC side, because outside of Kiki, 16 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, a double for her as well. And then you have JuJu with 25, 6, and 5, 9 for 16 from the field, 3 big blocks. You look at the rest of the roster, and it's 5, 6, 9, 5, 6. So we also have it's a little bit more dispersed. I think that there were sometimes the points don't tell the full story. They were impactful in certain moments. But I do, you know, for me personally, I would like to see at least 3 people on the roster night in and night out in the double digits. I think whenever you put so much focus, and JuJu, Paige, obviously phenomenal basketball players, but whenever you put so much of a focus on one person each on each side of this conversation, it makes it easy at some point. When I say easy, I put that in air quotes, because nothing is easy about JuJu and Paige, but it makes it easy, for lack of a better word, to be able to attack them offensively and defensively. And you always need that wild card, if you will, that dark horse from night in and night out, who's going to be your reliable double-digit scorer that the team also has to worry about. And I think that's something that both these teams have to figure out, who that person is or who those people are.
Absolutely. And I would say, just from looking at the season that USC has had and going into this game and watching this game, I do think they have improved some on that front. But UConn definitely could stand to improve a lot more. Another thing that I think we're kind of forgetting when we think about UConn and what they are setting to accomplish this year is a big part of that is not there, and that is AZ Fudd. You know, her injuries have taken her out. She hasn't, you know, been that impact player that they were kind of counting on, right? Especially for this season. And so I think having her, when she comes back and when she's healthy and when she
was in this game.
She was, but I'm saying when she's
impactful,
in the way that they need her and want her to be, I think that will change a lot for UConn. But again, without her there, people need to step up. You know, there needs to be more people that are contributing and impacting the game for UConn, for them to take it all the way this year, like a lot of people are saying that they could.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the elephant in the room, the elephant in the conversation, before we get to what each team can do to improve. I'm saying this now because I don't think this is necessarily something you can improve, because unfortunately it just happens as part of the game. UConn's also battling with a very bad relationship when it comes to injuries. And we
Mhm.
have seen this team suffer injuries, catastrophic injuries at the worst possible point in their season. And for me, and I know for you as well, it's not something we can necessarily label an improvement because there's no way to avoid an injury. It just kind of happens.
Right.
Um, but that's also something, that's kind of like the dark cloud over this team's head. And I would believe that even though you don't think about it, it's always kind of lingering because of how much of a familiarity it is with just the makeup of this Huskies team. You're doing everything that you can to avoid it, but I'm sure that's always in the back of their mind as well, just because it's so common for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be in the back of their mind for sure. But one thing that I know is on both teams' mind, right? Because yes, USC prevailed, but that second half was not good for them. It wasn't a great showing in the second half. And
Mhm.
UConn obviously did not have a great showing in the first. Both teams have some things to work on.
Yeah, they
Ashley,
do.
what would you say for USC is the main thing that they need to work on for the
Ball
rest of the
security.
season?
I'm big on ball security. I'm big on committing to 4 quarters of defense. I think sometimes when a team is comfortable in in what the scoreboard looks like and what their lead looks like, they forget the fundamentals and they take their foot off the defensive gas. And there's always going, basketball is a game of runs, right? So there's always going to be a moment where your shots aren't falling. And we saw that for USC. They were getting good looks, their shots weren't falling. You know, um, their transitions were maybe a little bit too quick and they weren't getting the best look, so they were kind of forcing certain shots up and they were settling for threes when they should have drove it to the basket, and vice versa. So my thing is like, while you're going through the runs, while you're going through moments where a certain player may be going cold or a certain player is getting doubled more than she was getting doubled in the first half, by committing to 4 quarters of defense, you always have an opportunity to keep that lead at a comfortable point until you can get back into the swing of things. And what I saw specifically in the third quarter was USC looking like a different team defensively than they were in the first half. The ball security wasn't there, the passing was lazy. Yeah, for what Abby says, I agree. They were lacking focus defensively. It was just like they got a little bit, Cam Newton has this saying, and I steal it all the time. They had a little bit too much dip on their chip coming out of that locker room in the second half. And you always have to play like you're down. You can never play like you're up. And I think that that's something that I would like to see them improve on.
Without a doubt, I couldn't agree more. And something I would add specifically to that and just put a pin in it is turnovers. They had
Mhm.
18 turnovers in this game, which you can't have if you're going to be the caliber of team that people are saying that they are. And we know them to be at times, right? And
Because if
so
Abby
yeah,
didn't miss those free throws, girl, this would be an overtime, and then that's a different
listen,
game.
listen,
So,
a whole different game. But even the
mhm,
fact that they were in the position to possibly go into overtime on some free throws shouldn't even have been given the lead that they had in the first half. So that
right,
speaks to what
right,
you said.
right.
And then also the turnovers, it got them back into the game and gave them the opportunity to be able to even, tie at the end. And
Yeah,
so turnovers, you got to take care of the ball. Period.
yeah.
USC.
I mean, on the side of UConn improvements, I mean, one of the things they did really well, I'll say, and I'll let you take the improvements that you think they should make, but I'll give them some flowers, is whenever a team turns the ball over, it's the opportunity of the other team to capitalize off of those turnovers. I think UConn did an exceptional job at capitalizing off of USC's turnovers, because what good is a turnover if you can't capitalize off of it? So I think they did a really good job taking the opportunities that were given to them by USC to further just chip at that lead and ultimately tie the game, bring it to the point where it almost went into overtime. Obviously, again, I know Strong is probably those free throws are going to keep her up at night, but considering how this team looked in the first half, I just think that there's a lot of material to look at in the film room, in the film session, whenever they go back and look at that film. There's a lot of things to be proud of, and there's a lot of things to improve on. What did you say?
I mean, just in one word, defense. Like they needed to
Yeah.
improve on that on all fronts. I throughout the whole entire game, that was something that I mean, Gino was saying a couple times when they did the reports. He was like, "I'm not really worried about that offense, but we need to get this defense to be able to even do that." So
Yeah.
definitely defense. And there was a lot of second, third chances that USC was getting off of rebounds that, you know, they didn't necessarily capitalize on, but I was just like, you can't do that. You can't let them
Mhm.
get these chances. And so definitely that needs to be approved upon. And then what we talked about earlier is huge. It's just getting more contributions from other people on the team so that it's not just Paige, it's not just Sarah. Like a game should never rest on the shoulders of any one or two players. And so that right there is huge for that team too. And they have
Which
players that can
Which
do
I
that.
was surprised by, right? Because it was a home game. It's a home
Yes.
crowd. To go down double digits at home is one thing. It's mind-blowing. That should never happen. But role players tend to play better at home because it's a familiar setting, right? It's a familiar crowd. The crowd is rooting for you, not against you. So I was actually surprised, one, that they went down the way they did very early in the game. And then two, that you didn't get more of those contributions you're talking about from your supporting cast, considering you're at home. That was something that I definitely noticed and I was perplexed by, to say the least.
I I was and I wasn't because USC came out with a fire in them
Yeah.
that I just don't think they were ready for. I really don't. I think that they were almost caught off guard, and also they could not get a shot too. That was part of
Mhm.
it as well. And I don't know, just from looking at the game, I just felt like they were kind of shook a little bit in that first half.
But that goes back to your point. Even if that is true, UConn should have been more prepared for it, knowing this is a team that they faced before. And it goes
Yeah.
back to your conversation, or your points rather, about defense. Because it's one thing, UConn was definitely struggling, sorry, from three. So again, if you can't shoot, you can always defend. And the fact that they weren't doing that and allowed USC to run the score up like that early in the game at home, this is a team you've played them before. You know what they're capable of. Like, you should have came in a little bit more ready to counterpunch. And I think they came in a little bit of playing with their food a bit, as we like to say.
Yeah, I that's what I think. I mean, just from watching it, there didn't seem to be there was a couple of times. I mean, Paige is obviously on
Yeah.
fire all the time, but there was a couple of times that players came in and I was like, "Okay, you know, like bring us a little bit more energy," but it just didn't it didn't disseminate to the entire team.
Right.
So, but that second half, they, like you said, I don't know what happened in the locker room, but they came out and they definitely took care of business a little better. But
Yeah.
they shouldn't have been in that position in the first place to have to dig out of that hole.
Well, listen, I think that the crew said it best. The officiating crew of this game said it best. We're hoping we get this again in the Elite Eight. That was a phenomenal game, a phenomenal rematch. Definitely worth the hype, definitely worth the conversations. If you were not watching, you missed out on a good one. I know it was a slow start, but it was one hell of a finish. And that's how I like my basketball games sometimes. But if you missed any of it, Alicia and I just recapped everything you needed in this emergency pod. So you can catch this from the very, very beginning, share it with a friend, share it with another friend. And I hope everybody that was watching just knows that this is what we can expect from women's collegiate basketball this entire season. There's so many talented young women. There's so much potential. There's just so much to be excited about with this particular season. Just like it was last season, we're getting so much better, getting so many more eyeballs. This is just the beginning. If you missed out, you missed a lot, but don't worry. It's only December. There's a lot of college basketball
So
left,
much
but don't
basketball.
miss it. We'll have you covered here on the pod. So
We will. I do want to say before we go that I want to give a shout out to Sarah Kustok, our own Sarah
yes, our
Kustok.
girl. Yeah, I saw her
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
She is on We Need to Talk, and she did a fantastic job being an analyst on this game. I love watching her. She always brings the energy. I was like, she was getting me hyped the way that she
Yeah,
was covering the
I know
game.
the Nets missed her tonight because they were playing tonight too. So I know they missed her, but I'm glad that we had her on this game because she was like the cherry on top of an absolutely phenomenal game.
She absolutely was. And there's going to be so many, like Ashley said before, phenomenal games. I cannot wait to watch the rest of this college basketball season. Make sure that you tap in with us, though, because you're going to miss these shows if you don't subscribe, connect with us in every way. Ashley's pointing out all of the ways that you can connect with us. And after we get off
I'm
this pod, we're
trying at
going
least. It's
to,
all
well,
backwards. There we go.
but also after we get off, we are going to put up that QR code so you'll have another chance to scan and connect. Because listen, if you don't connect with us, you're not going to talk with us right here live like we are right now. We're going to be live again tomorrow too. And that's another thing. Make sure, because you're not going to get the alert, but we're going to be live again tomorrow too after the NCAA volleyball championship, which is going to be a good one. If it's anything like the semifinals, it's going to be a good one.
I played volleyball all through middle school and high school. I'll tell that story. I should have went pro. I don't know why I walked away from volleyball like the way that I did. I don't know who I thought I was kidding, thinking I was going to go to the WNBA at 5'7". Be serious, Ashley.
I mean, you still could, Ashley.
Nah, I wasn't going. And like, I'm 5'7", but like, you know how like Chris Paul's 6 feet, but not really. I really feel like I'm 5'6" and 3/4.
Well, I wasn't gonna say anything. I was gonna let you go, but you just validated.
I'm like
that
5'6" and 3/4. I'm 5'7" now, probably from the Pilates and the way it stretched me. But
Okay.
I wasn't going pro.
Okay.
Volleyball, I could have went pro.
Well, listen, we're gonna be talking all things volleyball tomorrow, so make sure you tap in on that. And until then, this is another episode of We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T.
Yeah.